A new legal fight over abortion underway tonight. According to court documents, Mayday Health and Watertown attorney Nancy Turbak Berry have filed a federal lawsuit against South Dakota Governor Larry Rhoden and Attorney General Marty Jackley over House Bill 1274. That lawsuit claims that the new law violates the First Amendment and restricts free speech. It is asking that a federal judge issue an injunction to stop the state from enforcing HB 1274, which is set to go into effect in July. That law restricts delivery of abortion medication into the state. In a statement to Dakota News Now, Attorney General Marty Jackley says, quote, "The U.S. Supreme Court has made it clear that states have the right to protect life. As with Mayday's previous unsuccessful lawsuit, I will defend innocent life." Governor Rhoden has yet to make an official statement tonight.